Most people assume complicated watches should cost more. More gears, more parts, more visible mechanics. A tourbillon rotates. A perpetual calendar displays information. A skeleton dial exposes its entire movement. There's visual justification. You can see where the money went. And because you can see it, it feels expensive. But in high horology, the opposite is often true. Some of the simplest watches in the world are also some of the most expensive. And that sounds illogical, until you understand what you're actually paying for. When you look at a watch like the Vacheron Constantin patrimony, it appears almost empty. 2 hands, hour markers, minimal text. No spectacle, no distraction. But that emptiness is deceptive. Because once you remove complication, you remove hiding places. On a busy dial, your eye has options. It jumps from sub-dial to aperture to movement detail. On a simple dial, your eye has nowhere else to go. You see everything. You notice spacing, you notice symmetry, you notice proportion, even if you don't consciously realize it. And that means every millimeter must be correct. Typography must be perfectly weighted. The distance between hour markers must feel balanced. The thickness of the hands must harmonize with the dial diameter. Even the curvature of the crystal matters. If it's slightly off, the entire watch feels wrong. Simplicity magnifies flaws, and eliminating those flaws costs money. Now compare that to a highly complicated piece. Complication demands technical skill, absolutely. But complexity can also distract. When there is visual drama, the watch announces itself. It commands attention. You feel impressed quickly. But refinement doesn't impress quickly. Refinement reveals itself slowly. And that slowness is what separates entry-level appreciation from mature taste. Take the Patek Philippe Calatrava. At first glance, it looks almost modest, understated, restrained. But that restraint is intentional. The case proportions are calculated. The dial layout is mathematically balanced. Nothing is accidental. You are not paying for what you can see immediately. You are paying for what remains correct over decades. Or consider A. Lange and Söhne's Saxonia. From the front, it feels disciplined. But turn it over. German silver plates. Hand-engraved balance cock. Sharp internal angles. Polishing that takes hours for surfaces most people will never even examine closely. The complexity is hidden. And hidden labor is often more expensive than visible spectacle. There's also psychology involved. When someone begins collecting watches, they are often drawn to impact. Something that rotates, something that moves, something that announces itself. Because impact feels like value. But as taste evolves, collectors begin to notice something different. They start paying attention to proportion. They start appreciating restraint. They begin to understand that silence can be more powerful than noise. And that is when simple watches become interesting. Not because they are empty, but because they are disciplined. It is easier to add more. More layers, more apertures, more indicators. It is harder to remove elements and still maintain presence. That's design maturity. That's brand confidence. When a brand like Vacheron Constantin releases a watch that looks this restrained, it's not because they couldn't do more. It's because they chose not to. Restraint is a decision, and that decision requires conviction. There's another layer most people overlook: timelessness. Complicated watches can age stylistically. Trends shift. A design that feels bold today may feel excessive tomorrow. But proportion rarely ages badly. A perfectly balanced dial from the 1950s can still feel correct in 2026. That durability is not accidental. It's engineered. In many ways, simplicity is the ultimate test of watchmaking, because it removes the spectacle. And when spectacle disappears, only quality remains. Only finishing. only proportion. Only discipline. Complication demonstrates skill. Restraint demonstrates mastery. And mastery is always rarer. So the next time you see a minimalist watch with a surprisingly high price tag, don't assume you're paying for less. You might actually be paying for more. More precision, more control, more invisible labor. Because in high horology, the hardest thing to design is something that looks effortless, and effortlessness is never accidental.